I grew up, like I said, I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but I moved around quite a bit as a child. My father worked for Travelers Insurance Company, and so we got transferred a lot. So I grew up mainly in the Midwest, Ohio, more than any other place. Also lived in Indiana and even Iowa for a couple of years. But I finished high school in Cleveland, Ohio, played football, basketball, and baseball there, and then went to Oberlin College in Ohio to play basketball and graduated from there with a degree in English and began working as a sports writer in Cleveland after that. Covered high school sports for a few years and then moved up to the NBA, covered the Cleveland Cavaliers, and then went to the New York Times from 1998 to 2004 and covered the Knicks, the Nets, and the NBA. And then in 2004, I went to ESPN, the magazine, to write feature stories for them, and eventually began doing a lot of television for them, and ultimately kind of morphed into more of a television personality than just a writer. And then in 2016, I moved on to Fox Sports. I went to Fox Sports because they wanted me more as a commentator and opinionist rather than just a reporter who would just report the news and tell you what's going on in the NBA. So in 2016, I went to Fox and served as their NBA analyst for a while, for several years, but ultimately last year was made co-host of my own show, First Things First. And I've been doing now The Odd Couple for almost 5 years. So everything is going well on the career front. And so I thank God for that.
If you have questions, text me at 773-519-8287. Chris, when I asked you, NBA insider, what does that mean? What is a NBA insider? We hear a lot of breaking news. You did that for many years, Chris.
Yeah, ultimately, it's a reporter. As I said, I was a beat writer for the Cavaliers, then the New Jersey Nets when they were in New Jersey, and then the New York Knicks. And then ultimately, I began covering the entire league. And so an insider is just a reporter, but the top insiders report, they really have sources throughout the league, whether it be players, agents, front office executives, even owners. And so insiders can give you kind of that inside information about what players or organizations may be thinking, what players they may be looking to trade or trade for, and just various things going on in the organization that aren't common knowledge. That's what the insiders do. So like you said, I did do that for ESPN for several years. I've covered the NBA now. I started covering the NBA in 1995. So it's been now 27 years. I mean, I'm not an NBA reporter anymore, but, with all those years of experience, you get to know a lot of people around the league and in various organizations and franchises. And so that all helps you become a better insider.
Yeah, I think in terms of news, you got a lot of different news. I've seen you break a bunch of different news for the NBA. What happens, like when you get someone tells you from a team, hey, we're going to sign LeBron James or something like that, or Kawhi Leonard is going to be traded. Do you have to verify some of those things? Is it two people that you're verifying before you could report it? What's that process as an NBA insider?
Well, traditionally, it's always two sources, but a lot of times it depends on the source. I have stories at times where an owner for a team would tell me something, or an agent for a player that I had a great relationship with and knew wouldn't steer me wrong, and you just can go with it. And so it depends, on the quality of the source. And so that's a big part of it, just knowing. And nowadays, when you look at transactional type news breaks, like a player signing with the team as a free agent, or a player getting a contract extension. A lot of that stuff comes from agents and agents who are, represent the players, and reporters develop relationships with them. And then you get a lot of news from agents.
Very good. Chris, one of the things you and I have gotten to know each other for the last 2 years, one of the things that we talked to you about was your wrestling with seminary and going to full-time seminary. And you actually, in fact, visited some seminaries while you were on the road. Talk to me a little bit about that and that journey.
Yeah, when I got saved as a senior in college at Oberlin College in 1989. And pretty quickly, I caught fire for God and really just had a heart for ministry, for reaching men in particular, all people obviously, but men in particular, and then even more of an emphasis on African-American men. And so I really felt I was doing a lot of, when I covered high school sports in the Cleveland, Ohio area, I had a lot more time than I have once I started covering the NBA. Covering professional sports is an all-consuming job. And so as a high school reporter who wasn't married, I was single. When I wasn't working, I was doing a lot of ministry on the streets, in prisons, in juvenile detention centers. I was just out there, trying to really reach people for the Lord. And I felt this, call to ministry. And honestly, I did not think I would be in sports writing for more than 10 years, if that. I thought somewhere between 5 and 10 years, and then I would be in full-time ministry. And as you said, I did apply to many seminaries. I actually was, I visited, what I did was once I started covering the NBA in 1995, most of the ministry work I was doing in my free time had to cease. Because again, I was traveling with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I was at every game. I worked my first year on the Cavaliers beat, the 95-96 season. I worked 188 straight days. And that was from baseball. I was helping out on the Indians, the Cleveland Indians, when they went to the World Series in 1995. So I started covering them late in the regular season, and then went right to the NBA. And I just, I was young and gung-ho and didn't know any better, didn't know to ask for a day off. And I just worked every day. And once I started doing that, I couldn't do much ministry. And so that's when I really began praying and feeling like the Lord was calling me to full-time ministry. And so when I was traveling with the Cavaliers, I visited various seminaries and interviewed with the admissions people, got tours. I went to Dallas Theological Seminary to visit. I went to Westminster in Philadelphia. I went to Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I applied. I didn't visit. I applied to Gordon Conwell. And so those were some of the seminaries. I went to visit Interdenominational Theological Seminary in Atlanta, which is the historically Black, 7 Black denominations. And I really did a lot of research I wanted a Bible-based seminary, and yet I wanted one that was, relatively diverse racially. And not only in the student body, but in the administration and the professors, the faculty. And then I also wanted one because I came out of the charismatic tradition when I first got saved. And so I wanted one that was open to the charismatic, Christian experience as well. And so those were great visits. I had great conversations. I actually called a lot of authors. I read vociferously when I got saved. particularly on African-American Christian history and African Christian history, but just American, Christian history in general as well. And so I had some great conversations. I called a lot of the authors whose books I had read and been influenced by. I called Dr. Tony Evans down in Dallas. Spoke with him. I called Reverend Walter McCrae, who's there in Chicago. I don't know if you guys are in Chicago, but I know you do a lot of work there. He wrote the book, the 2-volume book, The Black Presence in the Bible, which I thought was excellent. And so I called him. I called these guys, just cold called them out of the blue and asked them about what they thought were some good seminaries to go to, what some of my concerns were, and what some of my interests and desires out of seminary were. And so after visiting all those seminaries, I settled on Fuller Theological Seminary. William Pinnell, I had a great visit with him out there. And then when my wife, I was going to leave my job, and my wife got pregnant with twins, and she's a medical doctor now, but at that point she was just doing her fellowship, so she wasn't making very much money. And so we prayed about it and thought about it practically too. And we decided to put off seminary. And so I didn't go to Fuller. That would have been 1998 when I was supposed to go, or 99. And out of the blue, so the New York Times, not to be long-winded, the New York Times, after I covered the Cleveland Cavaliers at the Akron Beacon Journal newspaper for about 2 years, the New York Times called me, and they wanted to interview me about going there to work and cover the NBA for them. And so I interviewed with them, and went well. And then they wanted me to come back a month later for another interview with other people around in various departments, not just sports, at the paper. And so I in between that month, I called the New York Times and told them, look, I appreciate your interest, but I'm going into the full-time Christian ministry, and I don't want to waste your time. I'm not even trying to go further as a journalist. I don't want to waste your time with an interview. And of course they were stunned. And so, that was that. And I came off the Cavaliers beat. I told my newspaper, look, I'm done with journalism in about a year. So I don't want to, I'm newly married. I don't want to travel as much as I am with the Cavaliers. So if you don't mind, I'd like you to take me off of the Cavaliers NBA beat. And so I started covering the University of Akron. And I did that for a year. And then when, like I said, when my wife got pregnant and when we decided not to go to seminary, because she was going to, we were going to move. She had a job set up in Pasadena and everything. I started thinking, man, I probably should have went to the New York Times. And it's amazing, about a year, almost a year to the day that I told the New York Times, thanks, but no thanks. The sports editor called me out of the blue. Just hadn't talked to him in a year, called me out of the blue. And obviously he knew I was into the Lord. And so it felt like he tried to get spiritual. And he said, hey, Chris, I was out walking today and the birds were chirping and the sun was shining and it was a beautiful day. And something said to me, call Chris Broussard. So I'm calling you and I'm wondering, are you still going to seminary? And I said, well, I'm going eventually, but not for a few years. And he said, well, why don't you come work at the New York Times before you go? And so my wife is actually from New York City. So she was obviously excited. So we went to visit and I interviewed again with all the editors throughout the paper at the New York Times. And it was interesting because they knew why, that a year before I had said I'm going into full-time ministry and didn't want to work at the New York Times. And so I probably met with 7 or 8 people. And most of those interviews, we spoke a lot about religion and faith and even racial issues, more so than sports. And it was, one person really told me it was inspiring to see a young man talking about faith like that. Another person at the New York Times told me I would add to their diversity. And I said, why? Because I'm an African American? And he said, no, because you're a Christian. And so it was really God at work there. And so I went there. We ended up moving there. I worked there for 6 years. At times, I did get to feel like the bug that I wanted to go into ministry again. And so I was all set again to go to Alliance Theological Seminary in upstate New York. And again, the timing didn't work out. And so I remained in sports and ultimately just realized through prayer and, talking to other Christians that kind of mentored me that God had me where he has me in sports for a reason. And he's given me a platform that I never would have coming out of seminary. And I speak now at some of the biggest churches in the country. One of the blessings, Tommy, that I have in my life is that I have an incredibly wide range of fellowship within the body of Christ because of my position as a nationally known sports broadcaster. And so I fellowship with Christians. I have spoken at traditional Black churches. I've spoken at white evangelical churches. I've spoken at charismatic churches, multicultural, multiracial charismatic churches. I've spoken at Asian, majority Asian churches, Hispanic churches. And not only racially is diverse, but theologically. So as I've spoken at Catholic churches, Presbyterian churches, Baptist, Pentecostal, just a wide range. And I think most Christians that I see, at least, a lot of our Christian leaders and pastors, even if they have a diverse group that they fellowship with, it may be diverse racially, but it may not be diverse theologically. So people in the charismatic, train of thought, fellowship with people of various races in the charismatic wing of the body of Christ. Pentecostal, Reformed. I apologize for that. Reformed, same thing. But I've been able to fellowship with, like I said, I just spoke last weekend, I spoke at a traditional Black church in Houston. And I was thinking about it and I was like, man, now I've spoken at a charismatic, a huge mega church, charismatic mega church in Houston. I've spoken at a white evangelical church in Houston that would probably be more reformed. And now I've spoken at a traditional, historic African-American church. So that's a blessing because I feel like unity within the body of Christ is so important, particularly in this day and age. And we need to really be able to unite across racial, denominational, and political lines. And so at a lot of what I do, God is helping me be one of the lights in that area.
Yeah. And more so a lot of times, Chris, right? You never know. It's a journey that you're in. You may have one idea, but a lot of times God may open and close his doors or present different situations. Even covering the NBA has opened the door for many interactions as you've interacted with people like LeBron James or Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, all of those different things. So for you, let me ask you a quick question. We've been in this whole series called Faith and Work, and how God integrates and uses our work and how our faith integrates to how he has designed you. He has clearly designed you for networking skills, your ability to network and understand the NBA, to make an influence within the NBA and even now with sports. What does that phrase, integration of faith and work, mean to you, Chris?
Well, as Christians, all of us are called to represent the Lord wherever we may be. I look at Genesis chapter 4 and see that God gifted, it was 3 brothers. Tubal-Cain was one of them. Jabal, I believe, was another, and maybe Jubal. But they all had various skills. One was in herding, one was in iron work, and one was in music. And those were what we might call secular careers, but God had anointed each of them to do those things. And so, as I said, it took me a while to realize, but, God has called many of us to secular careers. Even as we may be on fire for him, we may have a burden for ministry, but a lot of us, he's called us into the secular realm so we can be light there. And so I think, we need Christians in the secular realm, corporate America, broadcasting, television, radio, whatever it may be, technology. We need Christians in all of these fields. And I think the way, at least the way I try to represent the Lord is, you don't beat people over the head with the Bible, obviously, but you just try to live an honest Christian life before them. Don't be ashamed of your faith. When a door opens, be ready to share. I've had many people, because they know I'm a Christian, come to me for prayer out of the blue. Come to me for prayer, come to me for advice, come to me just to talk about faith, or if they're, having a journey, a spiritual journey. And so I think that those are ways we can shine as Christians. And I also think we ought to be wholly committed to our careers, not workaholics where we overdo it. But the Bible says that whatever we do in word or deed, we should do in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I feel like as Christians, we should be among the most hardworking, dedicated employees that we can be, because everywhere we go, we're representing Christ. So I think if we work hard, if obviously we're cordial and treat people with respect, regardless of their beliefs or lifestyle, may be different from ours, but we treat them with love and respect and kindness, and we work hard and we're dedicated to our occupation, I think that's a witness in and of itself, because I do believe it's important for the world to see that there are people that they admire and respect for various reasons, for their athletic ability, for their intelligence, for their academic achievements, for their wealth, for whatever it may be, that they respect, but who also love the Lord. And that in and of itself is a witness. So, I just, like I said, that's how I think we as Christians can shine in the workplace, in our careers.
Chris, one question came in. A lot of times you talked about your early days covering the Cleveland Indians and the Cavaliers, and you were on the road for about 188 days. Look, I totally understand what you're dealing with, because to a small degree, I'm off to Jakarta, Malaysia next week, just came back from out of town, and there's really no consistency in church life, and you're always in and out of your home. One question came in is, how do you keep yourself spiritually sharp and resisting temptations? For you, everyone knows you. You have a strong following on social media. You're on TV, you're on radio. How do you keep yourself balanced? And also, how do you keep yourself grounded?
Yeah, some of that is related to my testimony. When I got saved, as I said, I was a senior in college, and I had just found out after doing a summer internship at the Cleveland Plain Dealer newspaper, which at that time was the largest newspaper in Ohio. They had told me they're going to hire me when I graduated from college in a year. And so I was, of course, ecstatic. And I really felt like, man, this is it. I have achieved, or I'm on the cusp of achieving the American dream. And so once I had reached that goal, I, after a while, began feeling like, man, is this all there is to it? Is this all there is to life? just getting this American dream and having a good job and making some money. And is that all there is to it? And I knew it was that what I was missing was Christ, because I had been convicted a few months earlier, my sin. And so ultimately, I had everything going for me in life. I had a promise of a great job when I graduated. Those who, we went to college, you can imagine how great a feeling that is to be going into your senior year and know that you already have a great job waiting for you when you graduate. I was co-captain of the basketball team. I had a girlfriend that I love, now my wife. Like, everything was going for me. And yet I still felt there was a void. There was an emptiness there. And obviously it was Christ. So I say that to say, part of my testimony is knowing that the things of the world and tremendous success, tremendous wealth, tremendous fame, those are good things, obviously. But they, in and of themselves, they will not satisfy you spiritually. They will not make you content. You can have all those things and still be empty if you don't have the Lord. So me knowing that, it's like, why would I, put my career ahead of Christ? Or why would I do something to get ahead in my career or to make a certain amount of money that would offend Christ, when I know ultimately that thing is not going to make me content anyway? So that's just a strong thread that's run throughout my spiritual life and helped me keep things in perspective. And then I think, look, I've just always believed, maybe, getting saved in college, I was not a part of the Christian community at my school. Certainly not before, for my first 3 years there. And then once I got saved, I met some more Christians and began fellowshipping a little bit, but I didn't have like a ton of Christians around me my senior year in college. And then when I started working, I grew up Catholic, so I hadn't grown up in like a Bible-based community or church or anything like that. So a lot of my faith walk was my own study, my own listening to various pastors that I really was impacted by. The three pastors that impacted me the most were Tom Skinner, who wasn't a pastor, but Tom Skinner, who was a tremendous, evangelist back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. I read his books. I listened to his tapes. I mentioned Tony Evans earlier. Listen to Tony Evans religiously. I would say, and I don't think this is an exaggeration, I believe I listened to a Tony Evans sermon every single day for about 3 years. And because he was on the radio, and then I was buying his tapes, and that was a great foundation for me as a new believer, because as you know, Tony Evans is very much on that word, solid, practical, biblical teaching. Even though I was in the charismatic circles and Pentecostal and all that, his practical teaching really laid a great foundation for me. And then Bishop Frank Reed of the AME Church in Baltimore, Maryland, who was Bible-based, but also very Afrocentric in some of his teaching, and addressed a lot of the issues of the day from a biblical perspective. So those men, impacted me. And I just, so a lot of my walk, that helps me being on the road when you're by yourself. And, you aren't able to go to church every Sunday. But all those are things that help me grow and remain strong even as I travel. And that's also one reason, Tommy, as you know, I founded a men's ministry called the King Movement, which is an acronym for knowledge, inspiration, and nurture through God, because I still felt and feel this burden and calling to ministry. And so founding my own Christian ministry was a way that I could kind of do do the ministry on my time. When my schedule is sporadic. So having my own ministry was a way that I could really do ministry when I'm available, so to speak. I couldn't commit to a local church. And even I have done that at times, taught Sunday school, taught various classes at the church with teens and particularly. But for the most part, it's hard for me to commit to a ministry in a local church because I'm traveling so much in my schedule. But having my own ministry allows me to do that.
And Chris, one of the honors, I'm very thankful for that. Now I get a chance to be a board member at your King movement. So very, very grateful for that, Chris. I got to know you from afar because I watched my favorite radio station, my favorite radio program, Mike and Mike, for many, many years. And you had a weekly appearance on Mike and Mike. In April 2013, and this actually applies to some of the questions that are coming in, you were criticized for comments that you made on the ESPN program in regards to Jason Collins coming out as a homosexual. I remember seeing that dialogue on Mike and Mike. Talk to me a little bit about that experience because you were heavily criticized at ESPN, and there are some who from the outside were calling for your firing. Talk to me a little bit about that experience and what happened there.
Yeah, that was interesting. We have to backtrack because that was in, as you said, 2013. In 2007, John Amaechi, who played for the Cavaliers, he's a former player at that point, he came out of the closet as a homosexual. And I knew John. I covered him. When I covered the Cavaliers, he was a player. We had a good relationship. At that time, he was not out as a homosexual. But I noticed after Amaechi came out and various NBA players might comment, guys were saying things like, they were asked, could they play with him? And the guys were like, yeah, as long as he don't bring that to me, hit on me or anything like that. Or some guys may have mentioned they might, have questions about showering with him, things like that. But anytime any athlete or coach or anyone said anything that wasn't applauding John Amaechi's lifestyle, they were heavily criticized. It might not even be something that was negative. It just might not be applause. And they were heavily criticized. And I kept reading article after article, seeing commentator after commentator call them Neanderthals and backwards and, all types of stuff. And so I wrote a blog on ESPN.com addressing the issue and talking about how I'm a Christian and I don't agree. I believe homosexuality is a sin, like all sex outside of marriage between one man and one woman. And I said, that even though, these are my beliefs, I said, we live in a diverse society and we have to accept diverse beliefs and lifestyles. And one of my good friends, when I worked at ESPN, the magazine, he was assistant basketball NBA editor, LZ Granderson. He was an out homosexual. And we had many conversations about that. We went to lunch and talked about it openly. And I asked him what led him, why he went into that lifestyle. He had actually at one point in college really become a Christian and kind of caught fire for God, but ultimately, obviously left that. And he talked about how he felt the Bible was mistranslated and things. So we could have these open conversations. And we also played basketball together. Like we played on several rec teams together. And, we were friends. And even though we were different in our lifestyles and in our beliefs, he actually asked me one year, I guess they're in Chicago. I don't know if it's there every year, but they have something, the Gay Olympics or something like that. I think they called it the Gay Games at that time. And he asked me to play in in it with him. He said everybody that plays in it is not homosexual, but you can come and play with us and all that. And I was like, man, I can't play in that. I said I wouldn't play in the safe sex games because that, to me, that would be promoting fornication. So I can't play. I can't play in that. You my boy, but no. So my point is, we had this really open relationship and just honest. And we were friends, even though we disagreed with each other. And so I wrote about that in the blog. And it was widely, this is 2007. It was, the response to it was overwhelmingly positive. I got thousands of comments about it. Now, this is before Twitter, or at least before I was on Twitter and all that. And so I got thousands of emails about it, positive, from not just Christians, but non-Christians, homosexuals, and 90% of them, even from the homosexuals, were positive because they said this is the approach and attitude we need, where we can be civil with one another, we can respect one another without, insults and things like that. And it was so positively received that Mike and Mike in the morning, they read a portion of the blog on their show. And Mike Greenberg said at the time, he said, this is the best, most reasoned explanation I've heard about this topic. And that was in 2007. So fast forward 2013, 6 years later, ESPN remembered that. And that's why, if you remember that show, it was Outside the Lines that I was on. They had me and LZ Granderson on, right? Who they knew were friends with different viewpoints on this topic. And I didn't know until I sat in the chair. And that's not unusual. But I sat down, I had done Sports Center about 3 or 4 times in the morning and just given an objective view. I didn't give my own viewpoint. I just said, look, I've been texting with players and coaches and executives around the league, and here's what they're saying. I was the first person to alert Kobe Bryant. I texted Kobe or emailed him, and he shot me back a comment. He didn't know. He shot me back a comment. I shot him back a comment saying, hey, can I use this? Can I put this out? And he was like, I just tweeted, so it was, but that, that's what I was doing on Sports Center. And then when I went that afternoon on Outside the Lines, it was a different, Outside the Lines was a show I'd been on many times. And that's a show where you more often, you're able to share your opinion, your personal view on these topics. And so when I sat down in the chair to do Outside the Lines, I didn't know, I thought I was going to be on by myself. And then we get, the earpiece and LZ was on. I said, oh, wow, LZ, what's up, man? And I said, this is going to be fire. There's going to be fireworks in this one, And sure enough, there were, as you said. And it's interesting because about 10 minutes after the show, well, first I got a text from someone on the show that wasn't there that day, saying it was tremendous, saying he wishes he had been there that day. He said we gave a great, reasoned, civil discussion on a hot button issue without, insulting one another, with being respectful to one another. And then ESPN, one of the top ranking executives, called me and said, that was great. Honestly, I thought he was going to be upset or, chastise me or whatever. And he said, we loved it. The show was great. We're just trying to figure out going forward, the rest of the week or so, do we want to use you as just a reporter telling what people are thinking and saying about this? Or do we want to use you as for your opinion, as a commentator, and you are able to share your viewpoint? And I said, I'm good either way. Whatever you guys want, I'm fine. And later that day is when the criticism began coming from around the country. The View, MSNBC, I think Al Sharpton was on there. Columns were written in the Washington Post and other papers. Friends of mine that knew me were being critical. Pat Robertson defended me on the 700 Club. That was nice. But I was getting criticized all over the place. And, but I was strong, It's interesting, Tommy. I was doing at that time, I didn't say anything at the time, but that encounter came in the middle of a 21-day fast I was doing. Just water for 21 days. I was a week in. And I know, that spiritually, that built me up. I didn't know it when God put on my heart to do that fast, but I know he was building me up spiritually to go through that. And I know as the time went on, I was losing weight naturally. I lost about 25 pounds. And I know as the weeks went on, people were looking at me on TV probably like, man, this dude is stressed. This dude is really, look at how much weight he's losing. And it had nothing to do with stress. It was just the fast. But it was a blessing because I ended up, ESPN had called me the night, once all the criticism started coming. And they called me and said, look, first they wanted me to release a statement. So I said, I'm not apologizing. And they said, no, we don't want you to do that. We wouldn't ask you to do that. We just want you. They were concerned that I would still be able to cover the NBA objectively, right? And so I put out a statement saying, that I made my statement. I respect Jason Collins. And I think it was courageous of him to come out and talk about his sexuality, which I totally felt and believed. And that was pretty much it. I said, I'll continue to cover the NBA. I've shared my beliefs before. This won't impact my ability to cover the league. And then the next day, ESPN was like, look, we're going to keep you off the air for a few days. And because right now, when people see you on television, they're not thinking of what you're saying about the 76ers or the Warriors or the Lakers. This is all front and center. And I understood that. And they were like, look, if you're going to get a lot of media requests, we want you to turn them down and all that. And I was like, all right. So the Breakfast Club, for maybe some of your younger viewers might know what that radio show, it's like one of the most popular radio shows in the country. It's first, particularly among African-Americans. Charlemagne and DJ Envy and Angela Yee are the hosts. And it's on in New York, but it's national. And so they had been critical of me. And I had a common friend with Charlemagne. And so I reached out to him to get me in touch with Charlemagne. So we talked that night. And Charlemagne was listening to me. And he actually was pretty impacted by what I said in a positive way. So he said, man, you should come on the radio show and talk about it. So being someone who is concerned about, my ministry to Black men, to the African-American community, to the hip hop generation, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go on this because they need to hear this, And so I went on it, and really it was about a 10-minute, it was a phone interview. I wasn't in person. It was about a 10-minute interview. And Tommy, I was able to really break down the biblical defense or biblical, view of homosexuality in a way they couldn't combat. Because, they came at me with, well, the Old Testament, Leviticus say you can't eat shrimp. You can't wear clothes with blended cloth, things like that. And so I was able to go into, the moral law and, just the whole break it down. And it was very You still might be able to find it on YouTube somewhere, but it went really well. And also, I spoke with Jason College. I reached out to his agent, was trying to get in touch with him. The next day, I spoke with Jason. We spoke for about 15 minutes. It was a good conversation. I let him know, look, man, people were writing that I thought he shouldn't be in the NBA. It was ridiculous, the lies. The media is, as we all know, incredibly liberal, and they lie. They either lie or they're wrong about some stuff, because they lied on me or they were just wrong. Like, to say that I ever said Jason College shouldn't be in the NBA, can't be in the NBA, was just a flat out lie. And I talked to him about that, and it was a good conversation. And I haven't seen him in years now, but we saw each other a few times after that. And, it was all love, no issues whatsoever. Seen his twin brother as well. And so, that was it. But I'll say this finally. I got so many people from the NBA, whether they were executives, coaches, players, coming up to me, thanking me for what I said. Christian players asking me, how to handle it. Other commentators and athletes from other sports reaching out to me. And even saying, look, we're going to look at this video. We're like almost kind of studying it because we thought the way you handled it was really, really solid. And then to this day, this is now 9 years later. When I go into arenas to this day, I still have people of all races, genders, and ages coming up to me and thanking me for saying that and for what I said and for standing up for the gospel. And I do think a lot of people are amazed that I wasn't fired, and that I still have my job. But that it's been a blessing. And that's one of the things I say, I've made mistakes in my job like everyone, but as Christians, we want to be so good at our job that we're indispensable. So even when people, they may not agree with us, but you're doing such a good job that they're like, well, I still got to have him. I got to have him. You know what I mean? LeBron James, Steph Curry, they can believe whatever they want. Their teams aren't cutting them. All right. They're that good, And so as Christians, we need to be that good at what we do to make ourselves indispensable in a world that may not agree with what we believe.
Chris, we're running out of time because you have to get beignets. Can I throw some fast NBA questions that I've gotten to you?
Yes.
All right, first one. When I say the names Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, what's going to happen come the beginning of the NBA season? Take out Harden. Let's go to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant.
I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving will be in Brooklyn. I really do. I look, the Nets, Durant has 4 years left on his contract. Why in the world am I in a rush to trade him? If he wants to sit out and ruin the latter part of his career, so be it. He doesn't want to do that. He loves playing basketball. I don't see him doing a Ben Simmons or James Harden where he quit on the team. I think if he's in Brooklyn, he'll go out there and play his best. And if I keep Durant, then I definitely want to keep Kyrie. If I trade Kevin Durant, if I'm Brooklyn, then you're looking at potentially trading Kyrie. But I think both of them will be back in Brooklyn because really, Tommy, they haven't given it a chance. They've only played 44 games together in 3 years. So they really haven't even given themselves a chance to be successful. And there's no team, Golden State or Boston, sure. If Kevin Durant went to those teams, he'd probably have a better chance of winning a championship than in Brooklyn. But outside of those teams, with Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, hopefully in his right mind, and their role players, they have just as strong a team as anyone on paper in the NBA. And so there's really no reason for Kevin Durant to leave or for the Nets to trade him. So I think they'll be there. And Steph Curry was another one.
Actually, My thoughts for you in terms of LeBron James and the Lakers. Where do you think they're going to wind out? Are they going to trade Russell Westbrook?
Well, they'd like to, but it's hard. You never say never, because there were times in the past people didn't think Westbrook was tradable, and he got traded. There were other players that with big contracts you didn't think could be traded, and they were traded. So you never say never, but it doesn't appear that there is a trade out there for Russell Westbrook. So I think they start the season with him. I think LeBron stays in LA at least for the next few years. He loves it there. The city, his family is rooted there. And I think, look, if they're healthy with LeBron and Anthony Davis, they can be good. I don't think they'd win the West, but I think they can be a contender or, in that mix in the playoffs, a middle-rung playoff team in the West. And so that's how I think it'll go for the Lakers. I think Westbrook will start the season with them.
Chris, what do you think the Bulls' chances are this year, especially with the signing of Zach LaVine?
Chances of what? Of making the playoffs? I mean, they'll make the playoffs, but they're not a threat. I'm sorry, Bulls fans out there. They're not a threat. All right. They're a nice, cute team. But they're not beating Boston or Milwaukee or Philadelphia if they get themselves together, or even Brooklyn if they get themselves together. I'll give Chicago this. They don't have the issues that a Brooklyn and a Philadelphia have. Philadelphia, James Harden just continues to disappoint us in the playoffs. And then with the Nets, of course, we know their issues with Kyrie and his unpredictable behavior, and Ben Simmons and his mental health issues. So we don't know if they're going to be able to play up to the maximum ability. I do think the Bulls will play well. They'll play to the maximum ability that they have, but I don't think they're they're not a championship contender. They'll be entertaining. They'll be fun. Go support them, but they're not winning the East.
Two final questions for you, and you and I have chatted about this. I've gotten to sit down and hear an earful from Mrs. Jordan, who I've met, and she was going off about Scotty and his attitude toward her son. What was your feedback on The Last Dance?
Well, The Last Dance was tremendous, and it's interesting. Now, I know Scotty. I'm not gonna say we're buddies, but I've interviewed him. I've talked to him on and off the record over the years. And Scotty has often made a habit of making contradictory statements. All right. I've heard Scottie Pippen say LeBron James is the best player ever, better than Michael Jordan. And then I've heard him retract it and say, no, Michael is the best. So Scotty is all over the place at times. And with The Last Dance, Scotty saw it before it came out. Jordan, and they showed it to him. And Scotty told Mike it was cool. He was fine with it. And then after it runs, Scotty, comes out with his criticism. And, it's unfortunate. And Scotty feels like he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And I would disagree. Now, obviously, Michael Jordan is the superstar who gets the lion's share of the praise and credit for the Bulls' great run. But Scotty gets a lot of credit. Scotty was a top 50 player of all time. Scotty was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Scotty is viewed as one of the greatest defensive players of all time. Like, Scottie Pippen gets major respect. And I don't think he gets cut, short on the credit he should get. He just doesn't get the credit Michael Jordan gets, nor should he, And so I think that's where a lot of it stems from, is that Scotty feels like he's just not respected in the way he should be. And I think that's where a lot of his comments come from.
Last and final thing for you. A lot of times we've been seeing the presence of women in sports, especially sports media. Word of encouragement for the female leaders here. Sometimes in the Christian church, we have an attitude where men are in charge and women submit to the authority of men. We honor, respect the role that God has placed us and see each one of us as equals. Give us an encouragement as we wrap up for women here sitting in this room.
Yeah, well, I am in the midst of 3 very empowered women in my household. My wife is a medical doctor. She's, received many awards. She's a gastroenterologist, was the first African-American fellow at the Cleveland Clinic, at least in gastroenterology. So she's been, she's very high-powered. My one daughter went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and is now doing research in psychology at Yale University. My other daughter went to Michigan, and she now works is a senior vice president at BET, Black Entertainment Television. So I certainly believe in, as you said, God has given us different roles in the family, but I certainly believe in the empowerment of women. And in the sports world, it's getting much better. Not only do you see, as you said, you see women commentators, obviously many on ESPN who do a terrific job, many female reporters. Some of the best reporters I worked with were female in sports. And at FS1, Joy Taylor, I'm going to shout her out, because one thing you haven't seen a lot of are women in the opinion space, right? Whether it's First Take, Undisputed, our show, First Things First. Now there are some women on Around the Horn on ESPN, but for the most part, you haven't seen as many in that space. And Joy Taylor at FS1 is doing more of that with Speak for Yourself, which is one of our afternoon shows. And she's doing a great job, so I think doors are certainly opening for women. And now, of course, you got women coaching in basketball and in football and being executives. So I think all of these things, if I were a woman interested in working in sports, the doors are open. You have just as good a chance of getting in the sports world and working in the sports world as a man. Never look at yourself as, a second-class citizen, if you will, in the sports world. And so I think that, the doors are open. And if you work hard, you can get an opportunity to, to work in sports, just like me or a male coach or what have you.
Very, very good. Well, hey, enjoy your vacation, Chris. Enjoy some beignets, and we'll chat soon.
All right, Tommy. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
See you, Chris.
I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Simon. All right, as we wrap up for our last 5 minutes, I hope that you guys enjoyed this series. Bob, Dave, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to put this together. I hope that you heard from different perspectives. You heard from Bob Dahl, as well as Chandran Thomas, who are in the Wall Street financial view. And even though they've been highly successful, what does it mean to integrate their faith into what they do? You heard from someone like Chris, who works in the NBA, and how does he integrate? If I had my chance, I would love to introduce you to Tony Bancroft. He was the director of Mulan, Disney's animated Mulan. And so a lot of times how he integrates his faith, designing the world when he animated and directed Mulan as well too. Hey, a couple of things I want to show you guys, and as we wrap up as well too, final resources for you, that especially if you guys have this journey. If some of you guys are interested and want to do like a book club or something like that, let me know. There are a couple of things. Tim Keller writes this one book, and Catherine Leary Alsdorf, called Every Good Endeavor. Wonderful book in terms of this whole idea of integration, faith, and work. If we ever do this again, maybe next year, a lot of times I love to bring in Catherine Leary Alsdorf to have that conversation. A couple of them is one of my favorites, InterVarsity Press. I'm looking at Keith. Culture Making by the very, very wonderful thinker Andy Crouch. The role of Christian in culture. How do we begin to theologically look at their role in culture as well too? And then from that point on, designing your life. Dave Evans is a professor at Stanford University, wonderful believer, created EA Sports, EA Electronic Arts Entertainment, worked at Apple, all of that. He wrote this wonderful best-selling book called Designing Your Life, how God has designed you, how he has created you to really be able to continue to make a difference in that. And so a lot of times I'll follow up with Anthony as well too. There are some resources. I've gotten a chance to talk with each one of these guys on interviews. There's also an interview that I want to share with you later on. I'll send it through Anthony. Kevin Olusala from Pentatonics. Wonderful guy where he shares his faith in music and how he's continued to really be able to continue to serve the Lord in what he does as well too. Anthony or Ray, let's go to the final, the slide with the different points. Let's go next slide. Yes, that one. Couple lasting things. Practical application. Try different things at work and at church. God has designed you differently. He has made you unique. We may not know how God has designed you. You may not know what you're good at. So in some sense, especially as who are younger, try different things at work and at church. See what you enjoy. See what you don't enjoy. One of the things I realized in the midst of actually working at Ambassadors, I don't like managing people. I just don't. And so a lot of times I have to find certain people who really allows me to do what I do best. I'm able to create something out of nothing. I'm able to network with people, but I don't do well at managing people. Understand how God has designed you. Learn to reflect what gives you joy as you do different things. What is it that you do that allows time to fly by? If you also get a chance, take a trip within your city or another city around the world. See how Christians in the marketplace are making a difference in the city. See what's happening in Little Village, 90,000 Latinos in the 5 square miles. See what's happening in the back of the yards. See what's happening in West Loop. I'm going to Malaysia, Jakarta. I'm bringing about 15 people. One of the things that we're going to talk to and meet with is the governor and former governor of Jakarta who was jailed because of his Christian beliefs. Hear their stories. Understand how God is working in different cities. Talk with people through blogs, podcasts, books, and engage with what is happening in the culture and promise what God is and see what God is calling you as Christ followers to do. All right. Hey, 2 final things. Next slide. In terms of engaging culture, here, many of us primarily are Asian Americans, right? The Pew wrote this wonderful article, Culture Plays a Huge Role. What it means to be Asian in America. If you get a chance, Google that and all of that. And the next one, Roe v. Wade. Huge issue here in Chicago or in the world today as well, too. Whoopi Goldberg and Elizabeth Hasselbeck, who is a believer, Whoopi Goldberg is not, debate God's position on abortion on The View. Now, at the same time, watch that video. And as Christians, they both make individual arguments. See what those arguments say. Engage in the culture. And through your biblical grid, figure out what God is calling you to do as well, too. Again, Pastor Bob, thank you very much for this opportunity. It has been fun being with you for the last 4 weeks. I actually will come back in late August and do a sermon, so thank you very much, and I hope to see you when I get back from Asia. Have a good day, everyone. Oh, one last thing. I have some books here. If any of you guys are interested in books, there is this book by Brian Ficker, When Helping Hurts. As Christ followers, we are called to give. But what happens when we give to initiatives around the world and it actually hurts rather than it helps? So if you're interested, grab one. My friend Crawford Laritz wrote a book called Leadership as Identity. Again, if you're interested in one. And there's this one book, The New Shape of World Christianity. What does it mean for us in light of global missions as the world is changing today? If you're interested, they're yours. Come and pick it up. Have a good day. We'll talk soon.